Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. Today, I'm finishing off my Shining Gold Tales video reactions. And the first video I'm reacting to is 3 true scary Starbucks horror stories. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in the back, shall we? Okay, here we go.
Back when I was in college, I worked for campus security.
Okay.
I was studying police foundations, hoping to become a detective someday. The thought of using science and clues to solve crimes was exciting to me. Perhaps I read Sherlock Holmes a few too many times. Maybe it was too many movies. But that was my dream, and I was pursuing it.
You got a dream of being a detective? Pursue it. And don't let nobody else stop you. I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes too, but I watch more of the movies and TV shows with him in it instead of reading the actual book. But he is one cool detective character, and everybody would like to be like him. But anyway, let's continue.
I figured campus security would look good on my resume. That's why I took the job. I was on patrol one night. They gave me one of those e-bike scooters that everyone rides now. They were less common back then. I would do a few laps around campus. There were only a few streets that made up my route. I was on the main street driving slowly. I always paid close attention while I was on patrol. I looked back and forth between both sides of the street. I was coming up to the Starbucks on campus when I noticed something. I squeezed the brakes on my bike, bringing it to an abrupt halt. As I stood staring at the dark storefront, I saw that the door was slightly ajar. It was propped open by a rock. I got off my bike and approached the front door.
Yeah, that's a little sus because a Starbucks employee would not put no rock near the door of the coffee shop because they would have a key to get in and it would be unlocked for any customer to walk right on in. Maybe they were about to close it up and somebody snuck in and before they locked it and they put a rock right there just to leave it open so they can make a quick escape. I don't know. I'm just thinking at the moment. So let's just see what happens next.
I stood there confused, knowing that it would have been closed for several hours at that point. It was around 11 p.m., and the Starbucks closed at 6. I knew because I walked past it almost every day after class. I pushed one of the glass doors open, making sure to reset the rock after I entered. I didn't want to get locked in. Stepping into the store, I was unsure if I should make myself known. I decided to stay quiet for now, just in case. There was something very eerie about being in the empty coffee shop late at night. I was used to seeing this place filled with studying students and coffee addicts, myself included. I walked to the counter and looked around some more. That's when I heard a noise coming from the basement. It sounded like people talking. I couldn't tell what they were saying since it was muffled, but I was pretty sure that there was someone there. Although I was very afraid, I knew that it was my job to investigate. I pulled out my flashlight, but I didn't turn it on because I still didn't know if I should make my presence known. After I found the stairs to the basement, I took a deep breath before making my descent. When I was at the bottom of the stairs, the talking became louder, although they were still hard to make out. It sounded like at least 2 people, probably 3. There was another room in the basement, and I could see a light coming from the doorway, which was partially open. Trembling, I slowly tiptoed towards it. What I saw still terrifies me to this day. There were 3 men standing around a 4th man who was tied up on a chair in the middle of the room. The 4th man had duct tape over his mouth, but I heard one of them say something like, "Okay, we'll make him disappear then." When I heard that, I was so scared that I accidentally dropped my flashlight. Knowing that my cover was blown, I bolted back up the stairs, through the cafe, and out the front door. I jumped onto my bike and sped back to the security office. I don't even know if anyone chased me. There was no time to look back. When I returned with the police, the place was empty. There was no sign of the 3 men or the 4th who was tied up. They thought I was making it up, but I know it was real. I even found my flashlight in the basement, proving that I was down there earlier. So many questions remain unanswered. Who were those men? Why was that one tied up? Why would they use a Starbucks to do whatever they were doing? I may never know the answer to any of those questions, but I made it away with my life, and that is something to be thankful for.
That is true. You should be thankful for getting out of there when you could. But you should have kept your composure together and not dropped your flashlight and made yourself be known. You should have just hurried up back up the stairs, called police, and then by the time you guys get back down there, they probably would have still been there. If the rock near the door won't move, that is. But if one guy says so, we make him disappear then, that tells you right there that there were a bunch of kidnappers. But why use the Starbucks to hide that person? I don't know. Probably nobody was there and they figured they could sneak in the bottom of the building and hide that guy there. But man, I hope the cops did do an investigation and not make it look like that security guard playing a joke on him, because somebody was reporting that guy missing. So they might end up trafficking him or just kill him. You don't know what would happen. But hopefully they do find him before it's too late.
After I finished college, I had a hard time finding a job in my field. I spent several months applying for hundreds of jobs with no more than a handful of responses. As time went on, I began to broaden my search and started applying for jobs well outside my field of study. I ended up taking a position as a barista at my local Starbucks. I figured it would be good enough to pay the bills while I continued my search. It was hard on my ego since I spent 4 years studying, only to get a job that I could have done in high school.
I know you always have some tough breaks while trying to look for a job that you spent years studying for in college. But sometimes the positions you're looking for has already been filled and nobody ain't quitting or retiring yet. But at least he got him a job to sustain himself, like with purchasing food for him and paying the bills, like you said, because you never know when the job he applied for opens up, he could just like quit that one and go to that one. It's not like the end of the world.
However, after my first few shifts, I will admit that I really did enjoy it. I've always been a big coffee drinker, and I loved the smell of a freshly brewed pot. My coworkers were also great. The quiet hours in the shop were filled with laughs and inside jokes with the other baristas. This location had a lot of regular customers. Some were students coming in to use the free Wi-Fi. Others were your typical caffeine addicts, some of whom would come in multiple times per day. There was one regular customer, however, who caused a lot of trouble. You know the kind of person who's able to find something wrong with everything. His coffee was either too hot or too cold. The lights were either too bright or not bright enough. He also had a bad habit of cutting in line. It was like he thought the rules didn't apply to him. One day, he cut in line, pushing aside a sweet old lady. That was the last straw. I walked over to him and said, "That's it, Lyle. You have to go." "What? You can't talk to me like that. I'm your best customer," he barked back. Beads of sweat dripped down his round face. His breath rate accelerated as his anger built. "I saw what you did. Leave now or I will call the police," I said. I was not willing to back down. He gritted his teeth and threw his arms in the air. It reminded me of a child having a temper tantrum, like he was told no by his mother for the first time ever.
Oh man, it sounds like this person needs to go to some therapy, because life ain't like where you just walk up in line and get in front of somebody else that was already there. Sounds like this person wants to be like old Mr. Perfect, just wants to have the right temperature coffee and make sure the lights ain't too bright. That ain't right. I'm glad he stood up and told him get out before we call the cops. But I know he's gonna snap in a little bit, so I need to be careful.
I took a cautious step back in case he decided to throw a punch. Just then, he lowered his arms and seemed to calm down. Then he said sarcastically, "You're right. Please forgive me. I'll be out of your way." There was something unsettling about the way he said it. like he was implying that it was not over. I almost prefer to have a raving lunatic over someone who bottles up their anger only to explode at any minute. At least you know what to expect with the former. I didn't have time to worry about him, though. He left, and I was happy about that. My shift dragged on for another 3.5 hours. By the time I closed up, it was 9 p.m. I walked out the front door with Alice, who was one of my coworkers. Our cars were the only ones in the dark parking lot. Hers was on one side, and mine was on the other side. I inched closer to my car, unaware of what was awaiting me. When I was about 10 feet away, I saw a pair of eyes looking at me through the rear window. Someone was hiding behind my car. It could only have been Lyle. He didn't seem to notice that I saw him, and I was afraid that if he did, he might make a move. So I called out to Alice. "Hey, Alice, I think I have your car keys." I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's what came out. I walked over to her car. A look of confusion was plastered on her face as I approached. I told her that someone was hiding behind my car and that I thought it was the angry guy from earlier. I told her not to look because I thought he might do something if he knew that we saw him. Alice agreed to give me a ride home that night, and I would come back the next day to get my car. I have no idea what would have happened if I didn't notice that glint from his eyes. That rage that I saw in him was truly terrifying. If a man can't control his rage in a crowded place, who knows what he's capable of in a dark, empty parking lot? That was a close one.
Nah, seems like he can't control his rage, and I'm done with this guy that's working at Starbucks. He didn't like it that he called him out and told him to leave. So he was going to probably either mug him or probably beat the crap out of him in the parking lot. You just don't know. But he did the right thing and say to his coworker that he had her keys and talked to her real quick, and they got out of there together. But I'd be scared to leave my vehicle there because that person probably would have got up and started breaking windows and slashing the tires. But thankfully, that did not happen, and he was able to go get his car later. I mean, people don't need to be so rude and jump right in front of elderly people just to get a coffee. I mean, good Lord, you can wait like everybody else. But I'm glad that Starbucks employee was able to stand his ground and told him to leave because his actions were disrespectful.
I work as a security guard at various locations. Sometimes it's the shopping mall, other times they send me to the racetrack, or sometimes some office building downtown. My boss decides where I go. I don't really have any say in the matter. That's fine with me because it's basically the same thing everywhere. There was one exception, though. I did a 2-week stint as the security guard at a Starbucks. You may never have seen a dedicated security guard at a Starbucks, but if you saw the location of this one, it would make sense. To say that this place was in a rough neighborhood would be an understatement. Robberies were frequent, muggings happened often. You would hear gunshots in the distance almost daily. With that being said, the staff at this Starbucks were incredibly kind and friendly. In particular, I really hit it off with Emily, who was one of the baristas. She was about 25 with short pink hair and glasses. She was about average height and with a thicker build. We would sometimes take our breaks together and talk about random things. TV shows, gossip, you know, the usual stuff. I would usually stand near the front door where I could have a clear view of the entire place. There were 5 or 6 tables with a long counter and those bar stool style chairs along the side wall. Then there was the service area on the far wall where Emily and the other baristas worked. I was at my post when a man walked in. He was an older man with long gray hair and ripped clothes. As soon as he walked in, I could smell the alcohol on him. His demeanor was further proof that he had been drinking. He approached the counter where Emily was on duty. I could tell by the look on her face that she was uncomfortable. Who wouldn't be? He wasn't doing anything though, so I didn't step in. I could hear their conversation from across the store. I'll have a coffee, he said. No problem, sir. Will there be anything else? She replied. He didn't say anything, just stared at her, licking his lips. Emily looked over at me. Her eyes were screaming for help. I had seen enough, so I approached the man from behind. Sir, it's time to go, I said sternly. He ignored me, still fixated on Emily. I placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to show him that I was serious. He turned around swiftly and looked at me. He smiled at me, his rotten teeth hanging out of his mouth. Anger spilled from his eyes as his smile turned to an angry scowl. I took a step back, bracing for whatever he would do. He slowly reached into his belt and pulled out a large knife, then pointed it at me. I froze in fear. To be honest, I don't really have any self-defense skills. I don't even carry a weapon. My job is really more to act as a deterrent to people like this. I can't do much in an actual life or death situation. We stood there for what seemed like an eternity, my heart rate off the charts. Eventually, I heard the beautiful sound of a police siren, and it was getting louder. Emily must have dialed 911. When the knife-wielding man noticed, he bolted out the front door. From what I heard, he was caught by the police, but didn't get much more than a slap on the wrist. Some kind of probation or community service, I think. Unfortunately, crime is not taken seriously enough in this area. I guess there is so much of it that they let things like this slide. I guess nobody was technically hurt, but it's scary to know that people can do things like that and end up right back on the streets.
Yeah, I agree. It's scary to think that people like that would just roam free again. It would be a different story if he used that knife and killed somebody with it. Then he would have been away for life. Thank God somebody called the cops and got that guy arrested, because if they didn't, he probably would have annoyed the crap out of that female barista. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more shiny gold tails reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Square channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I said that's a wrap, and have a nice day, all.